ultimately it's your tone of voice. Your tone of voice is that it's really that golden ticket in getting people to really want to listen to what you're saying. So perhaps in-person presentation, you haven't had to think of it as much, but truly when we're now presenting on video, it's really about your body language and your tone of voice.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm Boris, the founder of the company and your host for today's episode. And I will start with the fact that we have someone truly special with us today. She's currently the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, a global business communications agency that partners with Fortune 500 companies to elevate, my favorite word, elevate their presentations, presence, and authority, both in person and on video. Before that, however, our guest was a broadcast television journalist and has even been awarded with an Emmy Award. How about that? She's also a LinkedIn learning instructor, and I'm stopping here because otherwise we'll never get into the episode. So who is this person that's joining us today? Her name is Jessica Chen. Jessica, welcome to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Boris. I love the way you introduced me. I love the presentation part of it. Fantastic job.
Here we have it. Even though, as I mentioned, that it's already way too late for me here in our time zone and I'm tired of speaking today, I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So let's start with, what did I miss to mention? Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm very happy to share how I even got to creating Soulcast Media, which is what you mentioned. So prior to that, I was a television journalist. I was a journalist for about 10 years, moved all around, started in Reno, Nevada. For those who are familiar, it's a very small town in the US. Moved to New York, was a reporter in New York for a few years, came back to California, which is where I am now, and I was reporting for ABC over in San Diego. And even though my career started in journalism, to be honest with you, I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now with Soulcast Media. So how did I get here, right? So the reason why I started Soulcast Media was because, and probably like you, Boris, I realized that there were a lot of people who wanted help and needed help with communications. So once, and for me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So for those who don't follow me, please look me up on LinkedIn because I post a lot of communications content. But from there, I started posting content on LinkedIn, teaching people the fundamentals of how to be a good communicator, right? It's a lot about understanding people, human connection. And then from there, to be honest with you, a lot of people got interested. And the reason why I think is I'm not afraid of being vulnerable in terms of sharing that I was not a good communicator early on in my career. I really struggled with being a good communicator. I'm very introverted. I'm also, I'm Chinese. So in our culture, I think we're taught a lot of things about you have to be quiet, you have to follow instructions, don't rock the boat. That doesn't make you feel very confident speaking up, right? So these are a lot of things that I struggled with, completely open with sharing with the world. And I think a lot of people resonated with that.
Wow. All right. Now, let's go in your TV background, because coming from that world and then moving to the presentation world, you work with some of the top brands out there, with the executives of those top brands. What are the similarities here? Like, what did you take from the TV world and successfully moved into the presentation? Like, what are the similarities that we can say, wait a minute, there are a lot of things that are very, like, I use and I reuse those same things in the presentation sphere or industry?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very good question. And I would think, and I will say 2020 was a very interesting year for our business because everybody came remote. Everybody's sitting at home in front of their computers, talking on camera. And because my background is a television journalist, I was always talking to the camera, right? That's how you get on TV. That's how you're on the news and watch the news. So I was able to teach those skills of how do you communicate to a video camera in a way that is engaging, it's interesting, but also authentic too. So that broadcast journalism skill of talking to a camera really helped me in terms of working with clients who are now doing video presentations, right? How do you connect with your audience, your one-on-one clients, or whoever it is, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that one probably indeed sounds like the biggest thing. So having in mind that everyone moved to the virtual world, everyone probably without any exception, and will probably, what is your estimate? Like, if you have to guess, how much long, like, how long do you think that would still be with us? How much
Yeah.
more?
So, more or less, I think 2020 made us realize that remote working is going to stay in some capacity. Will it be to the extent of what 2020 was, where everyone's locked down? Absolutely not. But a lot of corporate companies I'm working with are now saying that they are transitioning in terms of their company will be able to support employees who do want to work from home now. So in 1 year, in 2 year, I do think there's going to be an element to it in a lot of organizations. But here's the also other thing. If your organization is 100% back to normal now, right? Everybody's traveling, flying. It was like pre-COVID days. If your client wants to jump on a video call, you have to still be prepared and knowing how to present yourself on video, right? You always want to show up where your clients want to show up. So that's kind of what I always say. I do think, fortunately, this isn't going to be a forever situation, but I do think video calls, more or less, is going to stay.
All right. So having like talking about the virtual world, obviously big topic. You're also really indeed sharing so much content on LinkedIn. So everyone, as Jessica said, follow her on LinkedIn, period, for sure. What do you see is so different? Like, do you see, and in your opinion, are the differences between, hey, your clients were presenting in an in-person manner and in in-person fashion, and now they move to this virtual world? What is different for them, and what do you teach them so that they are at least that successful in the virtual delivery again?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. So, one of the hardest things about presenting on video is making sure the audience is listening the whole time. It is so easy when you're presenting on video and, within a few minutes, people just kind of start losing interest. That's a very natural thing to happen because all of us are just forced to stare at our computer screen, the 12 by 13-inch computer screen. And unless your speaking is fantastic, people are going to pick up their phones, they're going to start texting, they're going to start browsing, right? That is truly the hardest thing about presenting on video. But I will say it's not impossible. So, that this is where I always say, so making sure, your camera is on, you're using your body language to communicate because they can see that your body, what you do with your hands is part of you showing that engagement. But ultimately, it's your tone of voice. Your tone of voice is that it's really that golden ticket in getting people to really want to listen to what you're saying. So perhaps in-person presentation, you haven't had to think of it as much, but truly when we're now presenting on video, it's really about your body language and your tone of voice. Of course, your presentation deck, Boris, as you probably know, also matters. You don't want it to be very dense with text. It has to be there to accentuate your message. So all these things are really important.
And you also, by the way, looks like you're a fan of Prezi video. I've seen some of your presentations using Prezi video, and we had Spencer from Prezi, who is also
Mhm.
going to speak at our conference later, talking about this new innovation that Prezi brought. How did you get involved with Prezi video? How did you find it? Like, what's the case there? What happened?
Yeah. So I really have to give all the credit to Lorraine. So if Lorraine's listening to this, so Lorraine, she's part of their editorial team, and she was the one that reached out to me. And I believe she was actually previously LinkedIn. So she worked at LinkedIn, and then she moved over to Prezi. But fantastic. She basically found me because of the content I was doing on LinkedIn, and because I guess my forte, so to speak, is video, right? She was like, this makes sense, right? So let's bring on Jessica. So we had a few kind of projects we all did together. I've helped their team with creating some additional content. Uh, it's truly been fantastic. It's a really great platform for modern day video presentations.
Yeah, so that's how that collaboration started.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah. Prezi really did a good job, I think, with Prezi Video. That was one of those things that really differentiated them yet again. Like they were different before, but now with this Prezi Video, it is completely different story. So for everyone who still doesn't know what Prezi Video is, Google it. Very easy to do. Or as you can imagine, most of your talks are with Prezi Video though, or at least not most, but many, right? There are at least a dozen for sure.
Yeah. I will say, I really do think that when you start using Prezi, like there is kind of a learning curve because,
Yeah.
the way you build your presentation is completely different. But once it's done, the fact that you can interact with your presentation is huge. So I'm actually going to be doing a very large corporate presentation in about 2 weeks. And I basically let the Prezi team know that, hey, I actually want to use the Prezi platform to do my presentation. So I'm actually going to be very interested to see how people are receptive to it, but that's going to be in about 2 weeks. So I'll keep you posted, Boris.
Yeah, you need to keep us posted on that one for sure. And in those videos, I think it was with the help of Prezi, but I may be wrong. It's late here, so I may be wrong. So you were talking about, hey, wait a minute, if you are joining on a virtual call, you may end up in a different scenario. Like the meeting or the call itself may be one-on-one, maybe a team meeting, maybe it is you presenting in front of partners, customers, etc. And you made in that video a great distinction between the specifics of all of those. Can we go there for a second? Because I think a lot of people that are listening to this one, to the podcast, I mean, will benefit from hearing that one.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So, are you ready? There's a lot of information. So, in my presentations, I always talk about depending on the video scenario you're in, there are different challenges in those scenarios. And within those challenges, there are different solutions. So, what are the video scenarios, right? So, the first video scenario you may find yourself in is you in a video meeting with other people. Internally, externally, right? So, for example, if you're on Zoom, you have 5 or 10 other people in this video meeting. What are the challenges? People don't know when to speak. People talk too much. No one can hear each other, right? It can get very messy. Or it's just completely silent because nobody knows what to do, right? So that's the first scenario and the challenges. The second scenario that you may find yourself in is you just giving a presentation on video, right? So you have an audience, 1, 2, 5, 100, right? And then you are sharing your presentation screen. The challenge with this is how do you maintain that continuous energy, right? How do you, like we talked about earlier, how can you speak in a way that will want people to listen to what you're saying for 20, 30, 40 minutes, right? That's very hard. The last scenario that I identify is this type of one-on-one meeting that we're in, right? Me and one other person. The point of these types of meeting is because it's private, it's between two people, you ideally want to build that trust and connection with the other person. But because we're on video, it's hard, right? So I break down these 3 scenarios and the things that, we do have to consider based on these scenarios. Do you want me to walk through what
Yeah,
people should
let's
consider?
go a little bit, let's go into the detail because I think all of those three, I was about to say both of them, all of those three are so much in the everyday life of everyone nowadays. I think
Yep.
it will be super nice.
Yeah. So for the first scenario where we're in a team meeting setting, right? It can get kind of chaotic or it can be radio silence. So my whole, I guess, thesis for types of video meetings is really you have to be very proactive. A lot of time people can just sit back and be very passive when they're in these types of video meetings because perhaps they're at home, they're comfortable, or they're just tired, right? Tired of video calls, another video
Yep.
call. But I
Yet
always
again.
say, yeah, in order to make sure you are being heard in these video meetings, you do have to take a proactive approach. So, what do I mean by proactive approach? So, if you happen to be the one organizing this meeting, right, do things like sending out an agenda for everybody. Be clear about the intention of this meeting. Are we coming together because we're making a decision, or I want your feedback, or I want your input, whatever it is? Do you want the cameras on or off? Be very clear about that early on, because sometimes you'll get half the people camera on, half the people camera off. And sometimes it can be very uncomfortable to say, okay, everybody turn your cameras on right now, because some people be like, I'm not ready. So again, set that expectation, right? So those are just kind of some of the tips. One of the other things I say is ask pointed questions. So in a video scenario, sometimes people don't know if they should talk, right? Because it's very unusual, awkward. So if you are taking a proactive approach, you can say, hey, Boris, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So actually say this person's name. This will perk them up, right? So there's little techniques and strategies. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is the presentation aspect. So one of the things that's really hard about this is there's so much information that you're throwing in your presentation, right? You know, you're the expert, this is your presentation, but how can you expect people to retain all this information, right? You're throwing it all at them at once. So I always say, and Boris, you can let me know if this is a strategy you always do, but I always say, be very clear about what people are going to learn in this presentation early on, and make sure you end it again to go full circle. So what you said in the beginning, say it again at the end. So people understand this is what they're going to be getting, and you're reaffirming that at the end of your presentation. You know, I mentioned earlier, tone of voice is huge when it comes to video, because your tone, I always say you have to think like you're a radio DJ, right? Your voice is there to really pull people in. So you have to kind of use that, even though it may sound silly. And I'll tell you, this is my broadcast journalism background. If you feel that you are talking too loud or you're being too animated, it actually doesn't translate that way on video, because there's a barrier between me and you, right? So even though I'm like, you know, thinking that I'm being so animated, it actually doesn't seem so animated to other people. So it's okay. Don't be afraid. The last scenario, that one-on-one meeting, sometimes there's people who just jump right into it. Okay, you and I just jump on a call. Okay, let's get down to business. But I always say, you know, let's spend some time just catching up. How are you doing? How's your family doing? You kind of need that. And here's my one quick tip. I always say that when people are on video calls, sometimes you tend to just look at yourself when you're speaking, right? So what I tend to do, and I always encourage people to do that, pin the other person's video so they take up most of the screen, so you are looking at them. You want to still emulate that, because like, you know, Boris, watching people's body language is huge with communications. So pinning the other person's video will allow you to look at them.
Okay, I hope that everyone is taking notes, or at least if you're not taking notes because you're driving or something, take notes later on. Okay, take notes later on. What about the? I want to ask about the setup, but that question I will just go there after a second. What about those massive calls where we are like more than 10 people or 50 or 100 or whatever? Do you see this need of, let's say, people having a moderator or just appointing somebody to help them out with the Q&A, with the chat, when this is more or less a presentation, a webinar of some kind? Do you see that one happening?
Absolutely. So I do a lot of corporate presentation, and I usually have, whether it's someone from my team or someone from their team, I'll always have a person there who will be monitoring the chat function, right? Because when I'm presenting, I'm not trying to look at the chat function. It's going to distract my flow. So I always say early on, if I'm doing a presentation, hey, everybody, you know, so this is what we're going to be talking about today. If anybody has any questions as I'm doing this presentation, throw it in the chat. Jennifer is watching. She's going to consolidate all the questions and she's monitoring it. So I'm basically cueing the audience to let them know. And I'll actually remind them throughout the presentation too. So yes, having a tag team is a great approach.
Yeah. And I think that also, like, even appointing people from the audience sometimes can work very, very well. Very, very well. I don't know, like maybe except we talked with another LinkedIn learning instructor, by the way, back then, like 10 episodes ago, that maybe the only business case, maybe it's not the only one, but one of the exceptions is when they have actually paid for the training and they're trainees, right? They're people that are part of the training and they want to learn and focus their whole energy on learning. And then if we as the presenter say, hey, why don't you monitor the chat? it will be kind of tricky, right? It will be like,
Mhm.
I'm paying for this training, but then I became the moderator somehow. Not sure whether or not that will work, especially for some type of training, for
I
some
agree.
trainings, not for every, but for some. Yeah, that one I think could be tricky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. So yeah, if it could be someone from your team, um, or a colleague, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not somebody who's paying to actually listen to what you're
Yeah,
saying.
exactly. Exactly. So now back to the setup. What about the setup? What do you advise your people to use? Do you advise them to invest in something nowadays? What are the things that you are just talking with them about?
Yeah. So right now I'm on my laptop and I'm not using any microphones personally. So, but I think my MacBook is fairly new, so I think the quality is pretty good. So hopefully you can hear me.
You have the studio
So
mic, as Apple says.
So I'm using just pretty much my laptop, but I do have a ring light. I highly, highly suggest a ring light. Ring lights really just make a difference in terms of like, lighting up your face so people can see, what am I doing with my eyes, my eyebrows, my smile, right? I think that's really important. But I will say, for people who tend to have audio issues, it is also worth investing in, I know you have a microphone in front of you right now,
Yeah.
Boris, but like, little things like that, especially now that we have to accept video calls will be more or less in our lives, it's worth investing in.
Yeah. And what about the video cam? Do you also do you advise them also on the video cam part, or do you say, hey, if you have like good light, or you have the ring light, your video cam will be more than enough? Because that is it's a debate out there. Like people are no invest in this. If you have a good light, or if the light's in front of you, it will be more than okay. If you have a window in front of you, it's okay. What's your kind of take on it? What do you feel?
So, for example, the room I'm sitting in right now actually gets really, really good natural light. And I actually don't need to turn on my ring light and it can still look fine. But sometimes, if I want to add just that little extra element, especially if I'm doing a formal presentation, I will turn it on. But if I'm just doing like a regular meeting, perhaps I might not turn it on. But it's just good to give you the option. I'll let you know the one that I'm using right now, the ring light, it's only like $20, right? It's not too much. It's what, like a lunch. So I think it's worth doing.
It's a worthy investment, and you buy it once and forget about it forever. Like, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, like, every single time when you work with the executives that you work with, what are they searching for? Like, what type of help do they need most of the times? What are you seeing? Do you have something like, have you
Mhm.
collected the data and analyzed it and said, wait a minute, most of the times these are the top three asks from them?
Yeah.
Like, what do you
I
see?
will tell you that when I work with my executive clients, a lot of them come to me because they are thinking that they need help with their public speaking. But a
Mm,
lot of time, we will actually, and this I will say, I'm a good percentage of my executive level clients, our conversation, in addition to helping them with their public speaking, their presentation, it does transition into me teaching them more of the leadership type of communication skills.
mhm,
So what do I mean by that? So a lot of the people I work with, they're very analytical by nature. They all started with numbers or finance, engineer types, super smart, successful in rising up the corporate ladder. But now that they're finding themselves managing a team, they're having a very hard time showing that more softer side to themselves, right? Being empathetic, right? Communicating to motivate, right? When you're a leader, you're communicating to motivate, to inspire. And a lot of them, because they can be very black and white in their thinking, that they don't know how to show that, again, that softer side. So a lot of what I teach more with executive level clients is that, how can you build a connection with your team, right? How can you talk so that you're not, you're not instilling fear, but rather motivation, right? Because a lot of people, they get intimidated, right? When you're like the big boss. Um, but that's kind of like what I'll say. I do work with them in terms of, okay, how can you still be a leader, but also be approachable? And how do you do that with communications?
yeah. Is there a place for the modern at least in the last few years, there is a buzzword called storytelling. Is there something like, do you incorporate that one? Because I don't know, like whether or not you have seen this explosion of the usage of that word. Like every person I think out there is talking about storytelling. No matter who you are asking, everyone says we need a story, we need a story, we need a story, we need a storyteller.
Yeah.
By the way, while we are recording this, we are actually hiring a storyteller, but that's another story. Do you have, is that part of the overall thing there, especially with executives?
Are they asking for storytelling? Is that what you mean?
Maybe, or do you push them
Mm.
to include stories in their presentations?
So I do say that part of what builds connection, and I'm sure you can vouch for this, is you being open with sharing your story,
Mm.
right? As a leader, you didn't just become successful overnight, I'm sure, unless you were just born lucky like this, right? But I'm sure you had a story as well, right? Like how did you kind of like go through all those difficult times, resilience and things like that. I always tell my executives, you should share that journey with your team, right? Show them that you understand what they're going through. So that is where I see storytelling coming into this, right? Share with them your own struggles, share with them that you understand what they're feeling, and share with them that it's going to be okay, right? Because you were able to do it too. So that's where it is. And that's kind of what I also talk about, empathetic communications, and that's a huge part of leadership communication. It's just being empathetic to what your team is feeling.
Which is, by the way, so hard. Like it's very easy to say sometimes, even from our end. Like we also sometimes we have those discussions with our customers and saying, hey, like put yourself in their shoes. And even when you say that, in order for you to be really able to do it, it's so hard, right? It's not that easy at all. And people I have seen and experienced also with like executives and C-level people, like top people who are, as you said, like extremely clever, they really push themselves, like they really push themselves to become better, to know more, etc. And they really push themselves to understand who they're speaking to also times. And even when they try really hard, sometimes they miss something.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't know, like it's a story sometimes.
You know what? Sometimes some days it's gonna be easier, some days it's gonna be
Yeah.
harder. But the key here is that, self-awareness, that emotional intelligence of you. I mean, that's essentially what emotional intelligence is. Like you understand how you're feeling and you can try to empathize with other people feeling, and then you form your communications because of that, right? They say people with like low EQ, they just react. You react, right? But what you want to do is you want to respond, not react, right? So that's part of communications.
Yeah. One last here before we wrap this up. How big, like how important is for your customers and how important is for you to tell them that rehearsing is a big part of their success? I
Oh,
need to
it's
hear that from you.
yeah, it's huge, 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 huge. So I'll tell you, one of the presentations that I do, and I've been doing very often because of the time we're in, but I'm teaching a lot of corporate companies how they can develop executive presence on video, right? So it's a training that I do literally almost every week. I'm very fortunate, like, but a lot of companies want this training. How can me and my team develop executive presence on video? I've done this presentation so much, but I will always practice before I do a new corporate presentation. I will always sit there, spend at least an hour or two going through the slides again, even though I've seen the slides hundreds of times, because I want to prepare and practice. So there is, honestly, I can't tell you enough how important it is. So yes, practicing and preparing is huge.
Hopefully more people will hear that one, and hopefully more people who are listening who see and hear that even we in this industry, that the only thing that we are doing is actually presentations for living and trainings for living, etc. Even we are so into practicing and rehearsing, like
It is. I agree. And actually, I will say one other benefit of practicing and rehearsing. So, practicing and rehearsing is not just so you can remember what you want to say, it's part of you being able, the more you practice, the more succinct you'll be too, right? So I think that's the most important part too. It's like the more you practice, the more you say it out loud, the more you're able to say, okay, maybe I don't actually have to use so many filler words because you're actually practicing it out loud now.
Yeah. Do you have a magical number, by the way, for your customers? Like, because many people, have you received that one? So, okay, I will rehearse, but how many times? Do you have this magical number for some people? Because I have, for example, I say, hey, if first of all, the presentation needs to be an important one, right? Spend time on something that will be important. But if it's an important talk and you have delivered it, right? You have done it already. I would say, and still, if it's important, go through the presentation the way that you're going to deliver it 3 to 5 times, right? Of course, if that's not like 4-8 hour training, right? That's a completely different setup. However, if it's a brand new material, I would say, hey, go even further. Like, go even further. Do you have your own magical numbers? Because these are obviously absolute magic in here.
Yeah, people love numbers. So I
Yeah.
will say that the best strategy, and I'll say this has worked for me, is to not do your practice all in one day. So don't spend one day practicing for 8 hours. Rather, Monday, practice 1 hour, Tuesday, practice 1 hour, Wednesday, practice 2 hours, right? And then spread it out. And I truly feel there is value in that because you practice a little bit, you go through your day, you go to sleep, you wake up the next day. There's something about that, memory from the day before that kind of allows you to formulate a little differently versus cramming, right? Cramming and just forcing yourself to do it. So spread it out little by little, I think helps a lot.
All right. And now the standard question. Who should who should we get? Like, who is that one person that recently, let's say, made an impression on you for some reason related to presentations, right? Who is that person that you think we should try to get next on this podcast? Do you have a name that pops up in your head?
Can I say, Boris, you can try to get Oprah on your podcast.
You can say that. You can say that, but I'm not sure how it will work. I can type it down. I can write it down. No worries.
Yeah, just write Oprah down. No, I'm just honestly, I say that for fun, but because when I was young, the people who I saw on TV were the people I admired, right? And I mean, that's kind of like who I used as my role model because you just see them. So for me, it was always a lot of television journalists, to be honest with you. Those are my role models because I would watch them, be like, wow, how are they so eloquent? How do they speak in a way that's so clear, confident? So to be honest, and I know you are in Europe, I'm in the US, but everyone kind of has their own unique style in speaking. So that's why I can't ever say this is perfect, that's perfect, right? But I do think kind of expanding your influence, right? So, watching the different television anchors or, YouTube people who are very good at communicating, I think that can give you a very holistic perspective of communications.
Okay, so your response on that one is Oprah. I get it. Not a problem at all. We'll try to get to Oprah a few years from now.
Tell me when you get there, Boris.
Hopefully so. And by the way, if you're listening to this, anyway. so,
I love it.
Yeah, where can people find more about your incredible work and what is the best platform for people to reach out and connect? Is it LinkedIn again?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm very active. I'm usually posting some sort of new communications content every day, every other day. And so you can find me on my name is Jessica Chen, and you can just type in Jessica Chen or Jessica Chen page. Our website, soulcastmedia.com. But yeah, if you can find me on those platforms, also on Facebook and Instagram too. But yeah, I look forward to meeting everybody.
And also I'll make sure that we put a link in the show notes to your LinkedIn courses, LinkedIn learning courses, because those are great. And your collaboration also with LinkedIn Learning is, fantastic. The work that both parties you are able to do is incredible. Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I currently have 3 right now executive presence on video, speaking up at work, and presentation tips to investors. And I actually have 3 more coming out in the next few months. So yeah.
Are they all LinkedIn Learning?
All LinkedIn Learning.
Brilliant. You're going to chase one of our previous guests who is recording courses on LinkedIn Learning more or less for a living. But he is talking about design and the Adobe suite. He is chasing, by the way, and I'm not kidding, he's chasing 50 courses.
Wow.
I was like, when he said it during the podcast, I was like, all right. And here we go. So I was like, 50? And he was like, yep, give me one more year. And I was like, what is going on in here? He has 42, I think, right now, or something like this.
Wow. Good for him. I have to check those out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wait. Everyone wait. On the podcast, on the audio, wait. His family name was, I believe, Tony Harmer or Karmer. Let's see. I believe it was Harmer or Karmer. I'll double check. But Tony, just type in Tony Adobe and you'll find him. Like, he is incredible, and he's chasing those 50 courses on LinkedIn. I was like,
God, I can't imagine shooting 50 courses.
Yeah, imagine how much time does it take you to record one?
Oh, it's actually it's a huge production, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, of course. Just on average, like, what would you say?
Well, it's hard to say because, like, pre-COVID, we would actually fly, or I wouldn't fly, but their studio is near Santa Barbara, California. So that one course took about 2 days of production of shooting, but that's just the shooting day. You have your writing, you have all your planning calls. Oh my gosh, hours and hours, if not days, to be honest with you, for each course. But it's worth it. It's like the quality is extremely high quality.
Yeah, so. That is true. So everyone, monitor for and check out the show notes. And all the links will be there to Jessica's profiles, to LinkedIn Learning, to her courses, the website of her company. Mm-hmm. Everything will be there. Yet again, thanks for joining. That was a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast and for you to share all of that in regards to and relate to virtual presentations. I think that people, hopefully they took a lot of notes. Let's put it this way. Hopefully.
There's a lot of stuff, but hopefully everybody found it very useful. And Boris, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And we will be, I don't want to put you on the spot to see whether or not you will accept to speak at our conference in 2022, but we will talk about that over email. I'm sure you will agree. I'm sure. I'm sure. So thanks everyone for listening. You will find all of the links of Jessica's work and how you can connect on the podcast show notes. Also, in the meantime, the conference that I am mentioning is called Present to Succeed. Check it out. Our website, 356labs.com. You can also check that out. So again, thanks for listening. And in case you find this useful, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. We would appreciate it. Thanks again. And see you in the next one.
Bye.